So I was cut off just now, video that I was recording, and I will be putting that up on Shorts, or most likely you'll find it on Shorts. Just go watch it. It's more or less an intro to this and what it was leading me to before I got cut off. It's just the realities of this world. So just wanted to plug that in there or in this video. But let's dive in because I want to talk about something that, once again, it's a bit more lighthearted. And I also want to make a note of the fact that everyone's an individual. So naturally, my take and my perspective, or um, just like my point of view, once again, is my point of view. And everyone is going to have their own likes and dislikes as to where they feel most comfortable or where they feel accustomed to. And actually that's an important part of what I'm going to talk about, because I find that as someone that has spoken also about not being keen on the suburbs, and I believe I labeled one of my videos Suburban Hell. It's just like, I grew up, I was born and raised in the city. And to me, the city is where I feel like I belong. Or more so, that's what I've come to conclusion. Or like I've realized that I long for a need in my life, right? Given the fact that I live in the suburbs at this current moment in time. And I always refer to this area as like suburb slash rural. It's kind of a merge of both. But I have so many thoughts about living in the suburbs because I feel like it's very much so isolating. And I'm going to say this. I feel like part of the reason why a lot of suburban areas and rural areas are not the safest, if anything, not safe for many communities of color, is simply due to the fact that there's lack of diversity, which also leads me to wonder about something, right? Um, I was taking a moment to say, okay, I wonder if there was some sort of like mission or just reasoning behind putting a certain demographic, right, the white community, in a specific area, or kind of pushing them towards that. Or it could have been something that they personally did themselves, right? Willingly. It's this attempt to live separately, right? To live separately from even one another, which I feel like is very damaging and detrimental to individuals as a whole. Us as people, we need to socialize, right? And we need to build relationships. We need to be socially inept, in other words, in order for us to have um fruitful, perhaps is a word that I would, plug in there. Fruitful, or uh, a a positive life, a positive outlook, right? Because I feel like when you're isolated, you're also met, right, with news, which is fear mongering. Let's keep it real. News that is also biased, news that also doesn't serve anyone well when all said and done. Because I find that the news outlets have also historically um, been detrimental to communities of color by always labeling our communities as a problem, as an issue. And naturally, those very individuals that are living in isolated areas, living in suburban, rural, whatever it may be, which, as we know, are predominantly the white community, then take this information and move in a way that is not conducive, right, for all of humanity. Here are people that are isolated, that don't even socialize. I personally don't see people having interactions with one another in this neighborhood, which is very insane to me, given the fact that I grew up in a building where, yes, my parents were there even prior to when I was born, but it's just like, it was almost like we were all family. Like we all took care and watched for one another. We had each other's back. We inquired about one another. We inquired about our families and how they're doing. And that to me is so important because you don't live on it's not like you are on your own. It's not like you're alone. It's not like you don't have people that care for you, right? And I feel like places like this or areas where you are not in direct contact, or at least it's not promoted, it's almost normalized. If not, it's normalized to live in an isolated or an isolating life, which also leads me to wonder, hey, like, why are guns, right, or weapons upheld in these areas? Because, well, conservatism, there is a connection there with, oh, one has to protect themselves from what? From your fellow human being. It's mind boggling to have already such a distorted perspective and view on people that are also people. That, okay, so we're already not trusting. And I understand that we need to move with caution in this world where there is a lot of things that exist. No doubt there's a lot of evil, but to automatically assume that people are evil without even having an interaction with them is insane to me. Crazy. So I honestly feel like it does not serve people well when you are away from one another, where you create your own like place, where you create and you isolate yourself in the process. So so yeah, it's just been interesting. And honestly, I'm going to share something that I've also experienced just growing up and just living in New York City, or being from New York City naturally. And this, can be said, although, you know what, I was having a conversation with someone and she was a Lyft driver. And I was just telling her, I do appreciate the convenience in terms of just public transportation. And she said, yes, New York City is not like, ooh, apologies, is not like anywhere else that she had been to. And naturally, I can also attest to that as someone that has lived in other cities, or not lived in other cities. Well, I guess, yeah, other cities abroad, yes. And I've spoken about being in South Korea. When I was there, the train stopped running at a certain time. So there was a level of inconvenience when I've been in other places that have been away from New York City, even here in the States, right? So, yes, there isn't that level of convenience. So, I don't know what I was getting at with that, but it's something I wanted to mention. Um, Nonetheless, I remember having asked a question in regards to how to minimize noise. So I'm going to say there are always going to be pros and cons to everywhere you live. Naturally, I'm someone that loves the city because of the diversity. That's first and foremost. Diversity is super important for me. But as someone that is a woman of color, I feel like whenever I've been to places that are predominantly white, and interestingly enough, that very individual that I just mentioned that was driving me the other day, that was the Lyft or Uber driver, she mentioned this even prior to me even speaking about anything that related to racial dynamics. She said, oh, I went to X, Y, and Z. Interestingly enough, she mentioned an area that's not far from where I'm at. And I was just like, oh, and she, I was taken aback because I was like, so, you know, what my thoughts and opinions of this place are being confirmed right here with this conversation. Mind you, a conversation that I never brought up these dynamics, right? She, as a Latina, I'll say that much, as a Latina that also looks white adjacent, stated that she felt uncomfortable and unwelcomed going to a gym that was within these areas. It's not even in this area specific, a surrounding area. And it's 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 like I I'm glad I can have these conversations, but it's also just a reality check of like, okay, this is the world we live in, and a lot of people like to downplay the realities that exist in this country, a country that calls itself progressive. And I've spoken about that a lot. A country that calls itself progressive, but at the same time, let's keep it real. It's behind, and in terms of education, academia, and just, and I can only say if we as a country placed higher, or placed education or knowledge and truly invested on real history, the real history of America, and acknowledge what the real history of America is and was, I find that we as a society would be a lot more informed and forward thinking. Let's keep it real, because I find that the demise of this country is prioritizing things that are not important and not conducive for all of humanity and for propelling humanity forward. What do we place emphasis on? Things that relate to, let's be honest, creating fear, not only creating fear within our own society and people, but creating fear around the globe. And it's been labeled, like, let's also be honest, America has been labeled as a bully, as a bully to other countries. And it's also interesting how we see the bullying exists so heavily in certain areas within the US. So, and I'm going to say this much: the suburbs. It's something that I personally also never saw and experienced going to Black and brown schools. It's until I started seeing the news and seeing the prevalence of bullying in predominantly white, if not all white schools, that I was just like, interesting. But then not surprising, because this is the type of behavior that is showcased or normalized around the globe. And it's always mind-boggling to see the West want to label itself as a hero or one to do good in all of the world, but it's in complete contradiction with, having so much military power and having so much military power in order to continue to stay powerful. And naturally that comes with intimidation. But okay, right? And I know I've sidetracked completely, but just, I guess, to circle back to what I was going to speak about. So when, I've lived in apartments, and that's been for the majority of my life, naturally it comes often with noise. And it doesn't matter in which building, which area. That is reality. People walk, people have children, people are hard of hearing. There's a lot of reasonings besides, oh, people are playing loud music, people are doing X, Y, and Z. It's like there's so many more reasons, and there's more people, and it's also contingent on the structure of the building. But I remember inquiring about how I can minimize noise. This was prior to, interestingly enough, this was right before I moved here, probably 6 months before I moved to this location. And I remember someone saying, this is why you have to buy a house, or this is why you should buy a house. And oh my goodness, I can't with people. I can't with how much of the world thinks so linear. It's like, if you think outside the box, you're weird. Like, this is, oh my gosh, why are you thinking like that? Why are you thinking for yourself? What? I'm sorry, but last time I checked, I had a brain, and I just don't follow people. Like, I'm not gonna follow. I'm gonna make my own, build my own conclusions, check patterns, check data. Like, I have to actually think for myself. Critical thinking. I suppose that's not something that's upheld here, given what I've mentioned earlier. So it was interesting to see, and to see this time and time again. I feel like I've encountered that a lot, where people are like, this is why you have to have a house. This is why you have to buy a house. Because in order for you to not have noise, which I feel like that's untrue. There can be, if you live in a, I guess, more typical suburban area, because in this area I call it rural suburban, because there's a lot of land, there's a lot of greenery in between houses, and houses are much more spread out. But it's like, if you live in your quintessential suburban area, you can have loud neighbors. Like, you can have someone partying day and night. So, or you can have, just noise for any other reason. So thinking automatically that a house is going to bring you peace or quiet is crazy to me. So that was interesting to have someone, or to have people time and time again say, this is why you should live in a house, in a house, or this is why you should live in the suburbs or rural. Honestly, the suburban and rural areas kind of freak me out. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I feel like a lot more happens in suburban and rural areas than people bring to one's attention. And I feel like I've seen quite a bit on Netflix to know that suburban and rural areas are no way, shape, or form innocent. Okay? Let's keep it real. And they're most definitely haven't shown to be safer POCs, for people that are melanated. Yes. So for one to think or believe that the suburbs or rural areas are some form of heaven or paradise is mind-boggling. I mean, anyone can watch the news or Netflix, and yes, it's probably not the best to live in a state of fear, but it's like, when are we going to also recognize that these areas are just as dangerous? They're always painting city or urban areas, and I wonder why. Perhaps because people of color live it, yet people from the Midwest are moving. Yeah, white people are moving to these areas. Must have something that these suburbs and rural areas are missing. I don't know. You tell me. But these areas also don't pay well, don't pay livable wages within these locations. And naturally, I'm not going to say that. I feel like with many urban cities, the price or the rent is very high, and the pay is not too far behind. I mean, it's contingent on your life circumstances and where you're at. So I'm not going to deny that. But there is a lot more programs and initiatives that are within city or urban areas that don't exist. And that's something else to consider. Suburban areas typically don't have much going on. I don't know of anything happening in this area that gets people together. I mean, like, I even had my partner's parents knock at their not too far neighbor's home, and these individuals never even answered the door, and they were at home, from what I understand. They just wanted to let them know they were going to do X, Y, and Z in the yard, so if there was noise. So these very individuals don't even come to their door or at least inquire. If these areas are safer, wouldn't you naturally be like more trusting of one another? I'm confused. There's just too many contradictions happening there. So it's my goodness. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I've observed. That's what I've seen. And I'm also going to add that It's always interesting as well to see individuals, yes, expect people to, or all people, especially when they're in the US, or I don't know if this applies for other places around the world where people, every like in many individuals think that everyone else wants the same thing. Like, I automatically want to live in a house with a white picket fence because that's what is normally pushed out in this society, right? I want to have this specific life or live out this specific life. And it's interesting because the life that I want to live is so far from the white picket fence. I've never even wanted to live in the US for the long haul. I wanted to settle down in another country and build a whole another life. So I didn't see the reason for buying a house. Like, it's just interesting. People assume that everyone wants the same thing. I'm sorry, but I'm an individual. And last time I checked, I want what I want, right? And it doesn't look like what you want. And it's sad because I see this not only happen here in the US, because I feel like this was something very much so present when I was in Korea, where people had the same style. It was very much gonna keep it real, very like people or and I guess I'm someone that hesitates to speak on other places around the globe because, well, I'm not from there, and I I try to be the most mindful of that. I'm from here, born and raised here, so I don't want to or expect other culture. I never expected it, but to be honest, there was a lot of in terms of like style, like expression, all of that. I guess it was very much so mirrored in Korean society, and or when I was in Korea. So that's something that I have never been for, because I believe in individualism, and I believe when people embrace their truest self, they're the most creative, they're the most authentic, and they're the most true to themselves. That's the important part. Uh, and I feel like it also coincides with thinking for yourself, which is something I also believe in. I feel like people should be able to question. People should take the initiative also to question and to sit on what they've been taught and told. Because I feel like that is what allows you to really think. Um, Otherwise, you're just following. And I find that that's something I really encourage on my channel. I'm just like, think for yourself and be true to yourself, and actually always considering humanity and everything else that's around, including animals, nature. Um, because I feel like being yourself should also being your kindest self to yourself, right? And when you're kind to yourself, you can be um, when you move, right, and walk in this life, you can be kind to everything else around you. So uh, I'll that's what I wanted to say. It's so interesting, this world and everything. But I one thing I know is, like, you live and you learn, and I I find that having this experience to be here is also a moment to realize, well, this is not for me. This is not the the things that exist within this specific location, this area. And I can't speak for every suburban area. Many suburban areas are going to be heavily diverse when it concerns it being racially diverse. Uh, in this case, this place is not, right? So I can say that when you experience something, you get a better understanding of what you want, right? And what you need and what you value. So that's, I find that this is why having experiences in terms of life experience is a great thing because you can also take a moment to say,